please. Thank you.
It's like being back in the Knesset. Our claim to the land of Israel is not based upon Britain or the League of Nations or Harry Truman or Joseph Stalin. Our claim is based on the fact that the God of Israel gave the Jewish people a homeland, and we lived there. We had two empires there, and we never stopped thinking about going back to it. You think that if Great Britain had not promised us that there would not be a Jewish state now? There's a Jewish state despite Britain. There's a Jewish state despite the inaction of the UN. The state of Israel came into being because 6,000 Jews died in blood because Arabs attacked and we beat them. I'm happy to see that you say that there ought to be in Israel. Your logic is not good, because when you say you can't turn back the clock, and therefore the Arabs should accept Israel of 1967, but the Arabs are much more logical than you are. They believe that the entire country is theirs. What makes Haifa or Jaffa less to Arabs than Shechem and Hebron? It doesn't. So I appreciate what you say, but you're not relevant to the Arabs. And I have to face the Arabs and not you.
All right. How's the audience holding up? Let's turn to another side of many-sided coin. Next question is for Mr. McCloskey to respond to first. Is there Arab support for peaceful coexistence between Arabs and Jews living in Israel?
I think so. I think that the Arab moderates are faced with the Arab radicals, but I think that outside of the countries of Syria and Libya, and perhaps Iraq and South Yemen, although I'm not sure where South Yemen is today, I think you would find in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Jordan, in Kuwait, in the Emirates, in Saudi Arabia, that the majority of the Arab people in those so-called moderate states accept the right of Israel to exist. I think that all of those countries have a stake in peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis, because in each of those countries, Palestinians who have no passport living in Kuwait or Saudi Arabia or Egypt represent a threat to the leadership and the stability of the governments of those countries if those governments don't support the establishment of a Palestinian state. There's only one thing the Arab world agrees on, and that is that the Arab world must support fellow Arabs to have the right of self-determination. And with an Arab diaspora or a Palestinian diaspora with Palestinians scattered through 20 Arab nations, you have the seeds of instability in all of those nations unless the Palestinian homeland exists. But King Hussein, for example, the Saudi Arabian royal family, the government of Kuwait, the government of Egypt, Morocco, Bourguiba, and Tunisia, all of them have spoken out for acceptance of Israel if there can also be a Palestinian state and this Palestinian homelessness defeated. The Palestinians in many ways are the elite in the Arab world. You can't find an Arab government where the government itself, the business leaders, the professional leaders, are not heavily Palestinian. The Palestinians are like the Jews in America. They contribute an inordinate number of successful people in the professions, in the business world, and until they have a homeland and the ability to have a passport, most of the moderate nations recognize that there is going to be this continuing instability in the Arab world. I've spoken with the leaders of 6 of the 20 Arab nations, and in each case they have said they must, and their people must, recognize the reality of Israel.
Rabbi Kahane.
So living in the world of Alice in Wonderland. instability in the Arab world is because of the Palestinians. When Assad massacred 25,000 of his people in Hama, in northern Syria, that was because of the Palestinians. Syria had at least 15 coups from 1949 when Assad took power. That was because of the Palestinians. Iraq has coups. Iraq has bloody persecution of its opposition because of the Palestinians. The Arab world is unstable. It's an unstable world. The Palestinians themselves are not stable. If they would be a state, if Arafat tomorrow would say, fine, we accept the West Bank, and Israel would give them the West Bank, what would the extremists say? There would be peace there? Arafat is a paper general without an army. He can't speak for anyone except for perhaps Mrs. Arafat. He'll be lucky to survive. He'll be lucky to survive his enemies. He'll be called a traitor. And of course, assuming all this is true, which of course it isn't. The fact is that the Arabs have a stake in a Palestinian perpetual war against Israel, because that enables them to get their people's minds off their internal problems. If anything, it is Arab states, by their unwillingness to assimilate Palestinian refugees in their countries, who keep this pot boiling for their own reasons. If the Palestinians in the Arab world are like the Jews in America, why don't they settle in the Arab world like the Jews in America? We took in 800,000 Jews who fled Arab countries, a fact that is not often brought up by Arabs. 800,000 Jews fled. We didn't put them in camps. We assimilated them because they were our brothers and our sisters. So, if the Arabs truly want peace, let them stop massacring the Palestinians in Lebanon. Let them stop persecuting them in Jordan. And I just don't believe that what you say is true. I certainly believe that the burden of proof is not upon us, upon Israel. That if the Arabs began 5 wars, and now they suddenly say, now we have become penitents, the burden of proof is upon them. There is a presumption that they still want to wipe out Israel, that they have to rebut. I am not about to go back to a state of 1967 boundaries, which would make my coastline 15 miles wide, where Arabs can stand on the hills near Shechem and see the lights of our coastal cities, and bomb them, and shell them. Am I insane? The Arabs say they want peace. The burden of proof is on them. Again, if you fight wars, you gamble, and you lose, you lose. The Russians know how to win a war.